My name is Michael. 2 weeks after my mother's death, I returned home. This house had never felt warm to me. But this time, the coldness wasn't coming from the walls. It came from the memories. Old photo albums, notebooks tucked under chairs, boxes covered in dust. They weren't speaking, but they were trying to tell me something. When I was a child, my father Daniel would read me a story every night. It was called The Locked Forest. He'd sit at the edge of my bed and whisper, "Listen till the very end." But one night, he stopped. He didn't turn the page. He went silent, and that story was never finished. That night, my mother walked into the room, took the book from his hands, and shot me a piercing look. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any scream. The pressure she put on him was quiet, yet suffocating. At dinner, she'd push her plate away, ignoring him entirely. One day, he brought her flowers. She tossed them in the trash. "No need for theatrics," she said coldly. He never brought her flowers again. I watched, but I didn't understand. Back then, I felt something was wrong in that house. But with a child's mind, I buried it. At night, their whispers became arguments. I once heard my father cry, but every morning the house pretended to be normal. Now, I'm in this house again, years later, looking for answers to a story that never got its ending. Because my father didn't just abandon the story, he abandoned us. Or so I believed. My mother had told me he left for another woman. I was 6, I believed her. But now there's no other woman, no clear story. And my mother is gone, forever silent. In the attic, I found a leather-bound journal buried among forgotten things. On the cover, Daniel Turner. The first page read, "The house is quiet, but this silence is screaming." Grace smiles at me, but in her eyes, something hides. This isn't my home anymore. The words felt alive. I remembered something. My mother once smashing a teacup on the kitchen floor and muttering, "He's losing his mind, Michael. Don't become like him." I had been scared. Now I understood. Maybe she wasn't afraid of his madness. Maybe she was afraid of his truth. Inside a box labeled Plan B, I found old photos of Barbara and letters between her and Grace. Grace wrote about how to manipulate Daniel. "It's my turn now," one letter read. Another from Barbara said, "I could be a better wife than you." There were also documents of an inheritance conflict between Grace and her sister. Layers of secrets, all perfectly arranged. One journal entry from April 22nd, 1997, made my heart stop. "Tonight I'll escape." I loosened the hinges of the back window. If you're reading this and I'm gone, I failed. The rusted chain marks on the window, the scrawled note under a loose floorboard reading, "I opened the door, but she was waiting," confirmed it all. I found a photo of myself at 6, hands over my mouth. Dated 3 days after he vanished. I pinned it to the wall. That night, I thought I heard a voice. "Michael?" It was his voice, or a memory. I didn't know anymore. I went to therapy. I told everything. I placed the photo on the wall above my bed and wrote beneath it. Even then, I knew. But no one listened. I visited Mr. Higgins, our old neighbor. "Your father was odd," he said. But he remembered Daniel once whispered, "If anything happens, the letter's in the garden." I dug beneath the fence. There it was, a letter in my father's handwriting. "If Michael ever finds this," I stayed silent to protect you. But now I know silence didn't protect you. It only fed the dark. He had also written to an old friend, Thomas Evers, a letter never sent. My father's truth was hidden not just in rooms, but in unsent words. Months later, I published a book. The woman in my father's diary. Social media exploded. Some said I was dishonoring my mother. Others shared their own stories. One journalist offered to sensationalize the story for better sales. I declined. "This isn't a scream," I said. "It's a whisper we've ignored too long." Then a letter came. Linda. "My father was silenced too. Your book gave me truth." I realized this was never just about me. I built a simple grave for my father. The stone read, "Daniel Turner. He didn't abandon us. He was silenced. Now he speaks." I placed his diary beside it. And under that, "Your son no longer whispers." 1 year later, I stood on a TEDx stage. I left one chair empty. "This," I said, "is for those who were never heard." I read a journal page. Silence filled the hall. Then applause. A woman in the crowd raised her hand, crying, "My father too!" Tears welled in my eyes. "We are not alone," I said. That night, the silenced spoke, and it was only the beginning. After the book's release, media requests flooded in. Some wanted interviews, others wanted drama. I appeared on one show. The host asked, "What if your father really was unstable?" I paused. "He wasn't," I replied. But the people who refused to see him clearly were. The publishing house wanted to add a disclaimer to my book. "This reflects the author's perspective." I refused. It's not a perspective, it's testimony. When pressure grew, I pulled the book. Later, I partnered with a smaller press. The truth needed no edits. Night after night, I began hearing his voice again. In dreams, I saw him, younger, freer. "Finish the story, Michael," he whispered. One morning, I woke to find I'd added a final chapter to The Locked Forest in my sleep. I had no memory of writing it. Letters from around the world began to pour in. People wrote of fathers, mothers, siblings, silenced, forgotten. I started a digital archive, Voices of the Silenced. At the launch, I said, "We often think we're alone, but the silenced are everywhere, waiting to be heard." Then came the hardest truth. I had a daughter. One morning I found a drawing she made. Our family, 3 figures. But the father's mouth was missing. I choked up. Am I being silenced now, or becoming the silencer? I went back to therapy, talked to my wife, searched myself. Was I parenting in fear or in love? I didn't want to pass on my silence. That night, I read The Locked Forest to my daughter, page by page. This time it wasn't left unfinished. When I closed the book, she whispered, "Tell me another one, Daddy." At that moment, I knew. Some chains aren't broken by force. They're broken by voice. And sometimes, ending a story is how a new one begins. What if one day you remember a story left unfinished in your childhood and realize it wasn't just a story, but a cry for help? Michael did. He didn't just find his father's diary. He uncovered the truth. Secrets his mother kept hidden for years, silenced voices, chained emotions, all came to light. And what if you were in his place? Would you sink into the silence or dare to become the voice that breaks through the darkness?